Hello everyone, my name is Luca Gendolavigna and I am a PhD student in Nordic languages and literatures at Naples University L'Orientale in Italy. I am very happy to do my first presentation as a new member of the Social Science and Humanities Research Association, and I hope this presentation finds you well and safe. In the next minutes, I will talk about present-day Sweden, with particular focus on the representation of its multicultural suburbs in migration-related contemporary Swedish literature. Before we start, we should become familiar with some information that will be useful to contextualize the subject of my presentation. Some of the most known multi-ethnic suburbs in Sweden are known with the name of Miljonprogram areas, which are located on the outskirts of the three largest Swedish cities, Stockholm, Gothenburg and Malmö. Miljonprogram, this is the name in English, is a housing project developed from the 60s in Sweden during a period of great economic development, according to a functionalist principle. The project aimed to provide 1 million new houses in 10 years for the then quickly increasing population, especially for working-class families. The problem is that these areas soon became dormitory neighborhoods, where people didn't feel comfortable due to social problems and urban isolation. For this reason, native Swedes gradually abandoned these places. And meanwhile, a growing working class of immigrated citizens started to move to Miljonprogram neighborhoods, where life conditions are still today not seldom compared to segregation. These areas were initially considered places of modern diversity, but since the 80s are regarded as racialized places of relegation and disillusion. Professor Irene Molina, for example, shows that working-class immigrants are often stigmatized because Miljonprogram areas are exposed to social deviation and prejudices. Many young immigrant writers grew up in these areas, and not seldom in their works the suburban environment of Miljonprogram plays a central role. And here you find some pictures of Miljonprogram areas outside Stockholm. This is Skärholmen, and this is Rinkeby, a very popular multi-ethnic suburb in Stockholm, of which we will learn more later. The focus of my presentation is on the question in what way the works of Swedish migration-related literature actively addresses its suburban environment and how it can be read as a narrative of heterotopias in the theoretical context of geocritics or reassertion of space in literature. As we will see, Miljonprogram is described as a place where new relationships of belonging to Sweden are shaped. Immigrant writers not only describe the aesthetic appearance of buildings, infrastructures, streets and underground stations of these areas, but they also describe the life practices that take place there, the people's conditions and feelings. The image of Miljonprogram areas is reshaped, coming to be other or counter spaces, in opposition to the stigmatization they are characterized by. And for my research, I decided to take into account 3 literary works written by 3 different immigrant authors, where Miljonprogram play a pivotal role. However, for a matter of time, on this occasion, I won't be able to discuss all the texts analyzed that you will anyway find in my forthcoming article, where I will just discuss the first one, Theodor Kallifatides' De Sista Ljuset, The Last Light, published in 1995. Specifically, I will try to read and comment an excerpt from this work through the lens of the concept of heterotopia and its defining criteria, devised by Michel Foucault in 1967 during his famous lecture of Other Spaces. We are in the epoch of juxtaposition, the epoch of near and far, of the side-by-side, of the dispersed. With this quote, the French philosopher sanctioned what today is known as spatial turn, a turning point within post-structuralism corresponding to a moment in which spatial issues in human sciences are dedicated a deeper critical investigation. And here you find the quote I just spoke. During this famous lecture, Foucault coined the term heterotopia, which has a Greek etymology, as it is composed of heteros, different, other, and topos, place. Both in fiction and reality, a heterotopia is a really existing place that challenges the traditional idea of a place. Heterotopia is a radically different place lying outside from any other place, but it is always localizable. Heterotopia is, in few words, a place of ontological dispersion, but it is not to understand as a non-place like the more common utopia. No, Heterotopia is a real and heterogeneous place located within a national territory, representing a contestation of all the places of society itself. For this reason, Foucault also defines heterotopias, as I anticipated before, as counter-spaces. Foucault formulated specific criteria in order to identify a heterotopia, sanctioning a sort of discipline that he defined heterotopology. He listed 6 defining criteria. Heterotopias are not specific to any particular society. They can emerge or disappear in every moment in history. They are spaces of juxtaposition of several places that are incompatible and foreign with each other, and they are combined with different experiences of time, shaping what could be termed as heterochronia. They presuppose a system of opening and closing that both isolates and makes them penetrable. This means that everyone can enter into a heterotopia, but the very fact that we enter is simultaneously excluding us from all other places of society. Heterotopias function in relation to every real place, marking themselves as culturally definable illusory spaces of any real site. Based on these principles, Foucault provides some examples. Heterotopias are parks, amusement parks, cemeteries, our parents' bed, face, motors, museums, ships, theaters, etc. As we can see, the term covers both negative and positive places, where people behave differently because the common rules of society are suspended. In heterotopias, in fact, we act, speak, and dress differently. At this point, one might wonder what these places have to do with Swedish suburbs. By listing these examples as heterotopias, Foucault does not intend them as exclusive models. As he himself states, heterotopias obviously take quite varied forms, as they are deviant in relation to the required mean or norm of society. In this regard, a comparison with the multiethnic Miljonprogram areas becomes possible, and I will show how looking at Kallifatides' description of Rinkeby in his book. As these areas became the marker of a segregated city along lines of class and ethnicity, it is now possible, as suggested by Anne Heath, to narrate contemporary Sweden in new spatial forms, as immigrant writers can provide a different narration of cultural, social and linguistic environments in Sweden. Until the 90s, Miljonprogram areas and its inhabitants were by no means popular in Swedish literature. And thanks to authors such as Kallifatides, these places have broken into literary panorama and can now define what Sweden also is. As I anticipated, the siesta used by Theodor Kallifatides is the work I will focus on in this presentation. Kallifatides moved to Sweden from Greece in 1964. He is considered as the pioneer of migration-related Swedish literature, and his leitmotif is the condition of exile in a new country. His novel, The Siesta Used, is a reflection on post-migration identity, described through the figure of 2 first-generation Greek parents living in Miljonprogram suburb of Rinkeby. By means of the following excerpt, I will show to what extent it is possible to speak of Rinkeby as a heterotopia. I will read the excerpt in the English version, which I translated from Swedish. In this excerpt, the narrator tells about the first meeting of a Greek man with the center of Rinkeby. Then he took the subway, and when he got to Rinkeby, he understood what the bishop meant. It was like moving to another country. Very few people around him spoke Swedish. The suburbs without roads lived by life of their own. In the square, you could buy goods from all over the world. There was an energy in the air, and at the same time a distance that could easily be misunderstood as absence. Looking at Kallifatides' description, Rinkeby is the typical example of a place that could have caught Foucault's curiosity. As he said in conceptualizing heterotopias, he was interested in sites that have the curious property of being in relation with all other sites, but in such a way as to suspect, neutralize or invert the set of relations that they happen to designate, mirror or reflect. In fact, in Kallifatides' Rinkeby, cultural differences are not only present and accentuated, but they are desirable because Rinkeby is a place of inclusion. With an overview on the text, it is possible to observe Rinkeby through the lens of Heterotopias principles. First of all, as Rinkeby gives the impression of being in another country, a country without roads, it recalls the absolute difference from any other place, which is typical for Heterotopias according to Foucault. Rinkeby provides radically different ways of living, in which also the use of the dominant linguistic code, Standard Swedish, is subverted through the juxtaposition of foreign languages and cultures, and thus Standard Swedish is reduced to an exception, because as we read in the text, very few people around him spoke Swedish. Moreover, Rinkeby is a place of closure because a place without roads is leading to nowhere. But it is at the same time a place of opening, as it shows connection with every world's corner. You could buy goods from all over the world, as we read in the text. Furthermore, by organizing life and coexistence practices in different ways, Kallifatides Rinkeby takes on an oppositional relationship with the center, becoming a place where the normal conception of time and space is contested by different rhythms determined by multilingual and multicultural encounters. Furthermore, Rinkeby is a place of distancing and absence. Kallifatides does not provide any explanation for these feelings, but I believe they are to understand against the backdrop of Rinkeby's essential difference from the center. Rinkeby is so rich in multicultural diversity that it could be felt as a puzzle made of a myriad of fragments composed of several regions of the world. Therefore, Rinkeby could be misinterpreted as an absence, inasmuch as it is a sort of enclave, a place that simultaneously is and is not Sweden. In this sense, we can perhaps understand it as an absence of an image of traditional Sweden. Through encounters of several nationalities, ethnicities, languages, and traditions, the mainstream image of Sweden is subverted. In its fragmentary dimension, Rinkeby is a heterotopia as a space outside the required norm, as Foucault said. So Rinkeby seems to be absent from Sweden because the entire world can reflect itself in it except Sweden. For this reason, Rinkeby may be more similar to a panutopia than a heterotopia. I wish thereby to conclude by means of Foucault's quote I spoke before. We are in the epoch of near and far, of the dispersed. And as clearly stated by the Nordic Council in a recent study, Swedish suburbs are far from high-level employment opportunities, far from city center, and as Legeby also notes, this distance and this absence lead to a negative effect on the local public life. But here, Kallifatides' literary cartography of Rinkeby shows a place that could be regarded too as the radical negation of the stigmatization of which it is victim. Giving this marginalized, segregated, low-income area a privileged place in contemporary Swedish literature, Kallifatides is also performing a political narrative of belonging to an ideal of Swedishness that goes far beyond the boundaries of ethnocentricity and a mainstream image of a country. Thank you very much for your attention, and if you have questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. And here you also find my references. Once again, thank you very much.